do something a little bit different. I'm going to start a new series on this book. This is my copy of The Science of Yoga, which is the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. It's an interesting story how I came upon this particular copy of the book, The Science of Yoga. It was a series of synchronicities. But I'm going to read this book to you, and I'm going to start at the beginning, and we're going to go through it sutra by sutra and page by page. And some of the sutras, I'm going to go through the expositions. Some of the sutras, if they're not too complicated, we might even be chanting them, which is really delightful and a wonderful way to go very, very deep into the practice. So this is The Science of Yoga, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali in Sanskrit with transliteration in Roman, translation in English, and commentary by I.K. Taimni, Taimni. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is a 1971 printing of it, the Theosophical Publishing House, Adyar Madras 20, India, London, England, Wheaton, Illinois, USA. And it says that it was published in 1961. That was the first edition. And yeah, printed in India at the Vesanta Press, the Theosophical Society, Adyar Madras 20. So now I'm going to read the preface, which is written by the author who did the expositions. And we'll get started now. Ready? Here we go. A large number of thoughtful people, both in the East and the West, are genuinely interested in the subject of yoga. This is natural because a man who has begun to question life in its deeper problems wants something more definite and vital for his spiritual needs than a mere promise of heavenly joys or eternal life when he passes out of his brief and feverish life on this planet. Those who have lost faith in the ideas of orthodox religions and yet feel that their life is not a meaningless and passing phenomenon of nature naturally turn to the philosophy of yoga for the solution of problems connected to their inner life. People who take up the study of yoga with the object of finding a more satisfactory solution of these problems are likely to meet with one serious difficulty. They may find the philosophy interesting, even fascinating, but too much enveloped in mystery and rigmarole to be of much practical value in their life. For there is no subject which is so much wrapped up in mystery and on which one can write whatever one likes without any risk of being proved wrong. To a certain extent, this atmosphere of mystery and obscurity which surrounds yoga is due to the very nature of the subject itself. The philosophy of yoga deals with some of the greatest mysteries of life and the universe, and so it must inevitably be associated with an atmosphere of profound mystery. But much of the obscurity of yogic literature is due not to the intrinsic profundity of the subject, but to the lack of correlation between its teachings and the facts with which an ordinary educated man is expected to be familiar. If the doctrines of yoga are studied in the light of both ancient and modern thought, it is much easier for the student to understand and appreciate them. The discoveries made in the field of science are especially helpful in enabling the student to understand certain facts of yogic life, for there is a certain analogous relationship between the laws of higher life and life as it exists on the physical plane, a relationship which is hinted at in the well-known occult maxim, as above, so below. Some teachers of yoga have attempted to meet this difficulty by taking out of the philosophy and technique of yoga those particular practices which are easy to understand and practice, placing these before the general public as yogic teachings. Many of these practices, like asana, pranayama, etc., are of a purely physical nature, and when divorced from the higher and essential teachings of yoga, reduce their systems to a science of physical culture on a par with other systems of a similar nature. This oversimplification of the problem of yogic life, though it has done some good and helped some people to live a saner and healthier physical life, has greatly vulgarized the movement for yogic culture and produced a wrong impression, especially in the West, about the real purpose and technique of yoga. What is needed, therefore, for the average student of yoga is a clear, intelligible presentation of its philosophy and technique, which gives a correct and balanced idea of all its aspects in terms of modern thought. For while it is true that many aspects of yogic life are beyond the comprehension of those confined within the realms of the intellect, still the general philosophy and the broader aspects of its technique can be understood by the serious student who is familiar with the main trends of philosophical and religious thought and is prepared to bring to his study an open and eager mind. He can, at least, understand this philosophy sufficiently to be able to decide whether it is worth his while to undertake a deeper study of the subject, and later to enter the path of yoga as a sadhaka. For it is only when he enters the path of practical yoga and begins to bring about fundamental changes to his nature that he can hope to gain real insight into the problems of yoga and their solution. This book is meant to give to the serious student of yoga a clear idea with regard to the fundamental teachings of yoga in a language that can be understood. It does not present yoga from any particular angle or on the basis of any particular school of philosophy. Those who study the book will see for themselves that this science of sciences is too comprehensive in its nature and too profound in its doctrines to be fitted into the framework of any particular philosophy, ancient or modern. It stands in its own right as a science, based upon the eternal laws of the higher life, and does not require the support of any science or philosophical system to uphold its claims. Its truths are based on the experiences and experiments of an unbroken line of mystics, occultists, saints, and sages who have realized and borne witness to them throughout the ages. Although an attempt has been made to explain the teachings of yoga on a rational basis so that the student may be able to grasp them easily, nothing is sought to be proved in the ordinary sense. The facts of higher yoga can neither be proved nor demonstrated. Their appeal is to the intuition and not to the intellect. There is a vast literature dealing with all aspects and types of yoga, but the beginner who attempts to dive into this chaotic mass is likely to feel repulsed by the confusion and exaggerated statements which he is likely to find everywhere. Round a small nucleus of fundamental and genuine teachings of yoga has grown up during the course of thousands of years a volume of spurious literature composed of commentaries, expositions of minor systems of yogic culture and tantric practices. Any inexperienced student who enters this jungle is likely to feel bewildered and to come out of it with a feeling that his pursuit of the yogic ideal might prove a waste of time. The student would therefore do well to confine himself to the basic literature to avoid confusion and frustration. In this basic literature of yoga, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali stand out as the most authoritative and useful book. In its 196 sutras, the author has condensed the essential philosophy and technique of yoga in a manner which is a marvel of condensed and systematic exposition. The student who studies the book for the first time or superficially may find the treatment rather strange and haphazard, but a more careful and deeper study will reveal the rational basis of the treatment. The following synopsis will show how rational the whole treatment is. The first section deals with the general nature of yoga and its technique. It is meant, really, to answer the question, what is yoga? Since samadhi is the essential technique of yoga, naturally, it occupies the most important position among the various topics dealt with in this section. This section is therefore called Samadhi Pada. The first part of the second section deals with the philosophy of the kleshas and is meant to provide an answer to the question, Why should anyone practice yoga? It gives a masterly analysis of the conditions of human life and the misery and suffering which are inherent in these conditions. The philosophy of kleshas must be thoroughly understood by any person who is to take to the path of yoga with the unalterable determination to persevere life after life until he has reached the end, and the end is capitalized. The second part of section 2 deals with the first 5 practices of yogic technique, which are referred to as bahiranga, or external. These practices are of a preparatory nature and are meant to make the sadhaka fit for the practice of samadhi. As this section is meant to fit the aspirant physically, mentally, emotionally, and morally for the practice of higher yoga, it is called sadhana pada. The first part of the third section deals with the 3 remaining practices of yogic technique, which are referred to as antaranga, or internal. It is through these practices, which culminate in samadhi, that all the mysteries of yogic life are unraveled and the powers or siddhis are acquired. In the second part of this section, these accomplishments are discussed in detail, and the section is therefore called Vibhuti Pada. In the fourth and the last section are expounded, I'm smiling because it's so wonderful. In the fourth and the last section are expounded all those essential philosophical problems which are involved in the study and the practice of yoga, the nature of the mind and mental perception, of desire and its binding effect, of liberation and the results which follow it, are all dealt with briefly but systematically to enable the student to have an adequate background of theoretical knowledge. Since all these topics are connected in one way or another with the attainment of Kaivalya, this section is called Kaivalya Pada. On account of its comprehensive and systematic treatment of the subject of the Yoga Sutras, is the most suitable book for deep and systematic study of yoga. In the olden days, all students of yoga were made to commit it to memory and meditate regularly and deeply on the sutras for bringing out their hidden meanings. But the modern student, who has to be convinced first that the study and practice of yoga is worthwhile, needs a more detailed and elaborate treatment of the subject to enable him to understand its philosophy as a whole. Even for this purpose, the Yoga Sutras is the most suitable basis, not only because it gives all the essential information about yoga in a masterly manner, but also because it is recognized as a masterpiece in the literature of yoga and has stood the test of time and experience. It is for this reason that it has been made the basis of the present book. The task of an author who undertakes to write a commentary on a book like the Yoga Sutras is not an easy one. He is dealing with a subject of the most profound nature. The ideas which he has to interpret are given in the form of sutras, which embody the art of condensation to the utmost limit. The language with which the sutras are constructed is an ancient one, which, though extraordinarily effective in the expression of philosophical ideas, can lend itself to an extraordinary variety of interpretations. And what is most important, he is dealing with a science which is related to facts which come within the range of human experience. He cannot, like the academic philosopher, give free rein to his imagination and put forward merely an ideal interpretation. He has to show things, to the best of his ability, as they actually are, and not as they should be or might be. Keeping in view the possibility of the changes which are always brought about in the connotations of words with lapse of time, it is extremely hazardous to interpret the sutras rigidly according to their literal meaning. Of course, one cannot take liberties with a book like the Yoga Sutras, which has been written by a master mind in a language which is considered almost perfect. But it is one thing to interpret a sutra in a loose and careless manner, and another to bring out its meaning with due regard to facts of experience and recognized traditions of ages. The sensible way, of course, is to take into consideration all the factors which are involved, avoiding especially explanations which explain nothing. Another difficulty in writing a commentary in English is the impossibility of finding exact equivalents for many Sanskrit words. Since the science of yoga has flourished mainly in the East, and the interest in yoga in the West is of recent origin, there are no equivalents in the English language corresponding to many Sanskrit words which stand for well-defined philosophical concepts. And in many cases, the available English words with approximate meanings are liable to give a totally wrong impression. To avoid this danger, Sanskrit words have been used freely in the commentary if an exact equivalent in English is not available. But to facilitate careful study of the subject, not only is the original Sanskrit text given in the case of each sutra, but also the meanings of the Sanskrit words used in the sutra. Of course, as pointed out above, the exact English equivalents of many Sanskrit words are not available. In such cases, only approximate meanings have been given, and the student is expected to find the exact significance of the words from the following commentary. The above procedure will enable the student to judge for himself how far the interpretation is in accordance with the literal meanings of the words used in the sutra, and if there is a divergence, how far the divergence is justified. But of course, the final justification for any interpretation is its conformity with the facts of experience, and if this kind of verification is not possible, common sense and reason should be the guide. The seeker after truth should concern himself especially with facts and the truth underlying the various sutras, and should not allow himself to get involved in controversies about the meanings of words. This pastime he can leave to the mere scholar. A careful study of the Yoga Sutras and the kind of preparation and effort which is needed for attaining the objective of yogic endeavor might give to the student the impression that it is an extremely difficult, if not impossible, undertaking, beyond the capacity of the ordinary aspirant. This impression is certain to dishearten him, and if he does not think deeply over the problems of life and clarify his ideas about them, it might lead him to abandon the idea of embarking on this divine adventure or to postpone it to a future life. There can be no doubt that the serious pursuit of the yogic ideal is a difficult task and cannot be undertaken as a mere hobby or to find an escape from the stress and strain of ordinary life. It can be undertaken only on understanding fully the nature of human life and the misery and suffering which are inherent in it, and the further realization that the only way to end the misery and suffering permanently is to find the truth which is enshrined within ourselves by the only method which is available, namely, yogic discipline. It is also true that the attainment of this objective is a long-term affair, and the aspirant should be prepared to spend a number of lives, as many lives as may be required, in its wholehearted and single-minded pursuit. No one can know, in the beginning, his potentialities and how much time will be needed. He can hope for the best, but must be prepared for the worst. Those who do not feel themselves equal to this task are not under any compulsion to attempt it immediately. They can continue the theoretical study of yoga, think constantly over life's deeper problems, try to purify their minds and strengthen their characters until their power of discrimination becomes sufficiently strong to enable them to pierce through ordinary illusions and see life in its naked reality. In fact, this is the purpose of Kriya Yoga, to which Patanjali has referred in the beginning of section 2. When the inner eyes of true discrimination begin to open as a result of the practice of Kriya Yoga, they will cease to wonder whether they are strong enough to undertake this long and difficult journey to their true homes. Then nothing will be able to stop them, and they will naturally and wholeheartedly devote themselves to this difficult but sacred task. The important point is to make a definite beginning somewhere and as soon as possible, now. The moment such a serious beginning is made, forces begin to gather around the center of endeavor and take the aspirant forward toward his goal. slowly at first, but with increasing speed, until he becomes so absorbed in the pursuit of his ideal that time and distance cease to matter for him. And one day he finds that he has reached his goal and looks back with a kind of wonder at the long and tedious journey which he has completed in the realm of time, while all the time he was living in the eternal. I.K. Taimni. All right, so that was 7.5, 8 pages. The next page is the contents. So we just read the preface. Section 1, Samadhi Pada, is 125 pages. Section 2, Sadhana Pada, is about 150 pages. Section 3, Vibhuti Pada, is just under 100 pages. Section 4, Kaivalya Pada, is about 75 pages. And then there's an index. I'm not going to read the first sutra. I'll just let you know what it is. Atta Yoganushasanam. Yoganushasanam. Atta Yoganushasanam. So this is how it's set up. So you've got the Sanskrit Devanagari script. This is the Roman pronunciation. And then he goes ahead and he interprets the Devanagari script word by word, and then interprets it here, and then writes a commentary. So it's actually quite fascinating. So Atta Yoganushasanam, now, herewith, of yoga, expounding, exposition, teaching. Now an exposition of yoga is to be made. Okay, so this will be my next video. It's 1, 2, 3, 3.5 pages, and then we go to the next one. So this is my new series. I'm going to be reading the Yoga Sutras, and we'll be possibly chanting some of the sutras. And I can also create meditations on them. I used to, when I first started reading this book and I was going through it, I would memorize the sutras and recite them in my mind and use them as mantras to go into deep meditation. And it was quite a profound practice. And it was actually really phenomenal and very deep. So I hope you'll join me for this series of reading the Yoga Sutras together. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. Until next time.